Jayom Vishnupad Paramhansa Paribrajakacharya Astu Tarasata Shishimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridasa Thakur Ki Jai Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adigaur Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We're continuing today with Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 3, and we're on the chapter entitled, find it, New Jagannath Puri. Yes. The third chapter, New Jagannath Puri. New Jagannath Puri was a name that Srila Prabhupada gave to his San Francisco temple. It was by the ocean, and it was where Srila Prabhupada inaugurated the first Rath Yatra in the Western countries. Last week we had Satsrup Maharaj had just introduced a new devotee. Her name had been Linda Katz, and she was a graduate student at Columbia University. That's one of the Ivy League universities in America, in ancient Greek philosophy and history, classical Greek. So she was in between, wondering whether she should continue with her studies in graduate school, or if there was something else that she could do with her life, because she was feeling that her life in the university, though she loved the philosophy of the great Greek philosophers, the professors and the teachings itself became dry and lifeless. So she was looking for a way that she could live her philosophy of life. And as many young people in that times, in the 60s, because San Francisco, particularly this area of the Golden Gate Park, Hippie Hill, Haight-Ashbury, many of the young people were attracted there, hoping that they would find a new revolutionary way of life. So now Linda Katz, she has come to Hippie Hill, and it just so happens on that day, Prabhupada had sent the devotees early to start the Kirtan. He had walked from the temple a few blocks, and now he is leading the Kirtan. And this is when Linda sees the devotees, and she comes to the Kirtan party. She had been aching for a new, exciting experience, and she was ready to throw herself into San Francisco's hippie society. She had come here alone, giving up her fashionable clothes and donning bell-bottoms and old shirts, because this is, Prabhupada said something very interesting about the hippies. Later in the class today, Prabhupada starts telling some stories from the Mahabharata. And he explains that the good quality of the hippies is that they possess renunciation, which is one of the opulences. They were able to give up their family's wealth and their aspirations for material possessions and beautiful clothing, nice house, money. They gave it all up in search of a free life, which they were aspiring for, a life of truth and freedom and expression and equality, although not necessarily were they able to find it in hippie life, but at least their ideals included renunciation, which Prabhupada describes that renunciation and knowledge, those are the two principal qualities that one must have for becoming a devotee and advancing in devotional service. So since they had already renounced material life, by coming in contact with Srila Prabhupada and now getting spiritual knowledge, they were able to very quickly take up devotional service. So this is why he even said in Geneva, 1974, many years later, 9 years later, he said, I actually like the hippies because they had that quality of renunciation. So she heard about the hippies, although she wasn't a hippie, she was a graduate student, and she came to that place just so that she could meet the devotees. She had come here alone, giving up her fashionable clothes, but because she wanted to be serious, she felt awkward trying to fit in with the hippies. She felt that to belong, she was supposed to wipe the serious look off her face and just smile mindlessly. So even in the Society of San Francisco's hippies, she remained unsatisfied and lost because she was an educated young woman, must have been in her mid-20s by then, and she couldn't just become a mindless, intoxicated hippie. She was educated. The kirtan in the park was the most beautiful sight Linda had ever seen. The dancers were swaying back and forth, their arms raised against the open sky, and in the middle of the dance was a dark, gray-haired wise person sitting and chanting. As she moved in closer, she began to sway with the devotees. Then she sat down and started chanting, wanting to find out what was going on. After more than an hour of chanting, the elderly leader finally stopped the kirtan, and Linda began talking to some of the devotees. Although the Swami had slipped away, some of his followers had remained, handing out flyers and invitations to the Sunday love feast, and picking up the timpani and the flags. One of them asked her to come with them to the temple. Linda found the devotees to be something like hippies, but not scruffy street people. Scruffy means dirty, unkempt, like most of the hippies she had met. They were attractive, not repellent. Madrasas and plants decorated their little storefront temple. When she stopped before a painting of people singing and dancing, that was the Panchatattva painting that was there on the altar, one of the devotees said, "This is Lord Chaitanya and his associates." A devotee gave her some prasadam, and Linda left that night without meeting the Swami. The next day, however, at 7 in the morning, she returned, eager for another chance to see him. She thought he had noticed her at the park and might remember her. She had made a drawing of him, and she wanted to show him. We have to remember that spiritual life is eternal, and our relationship with our spiritual master is also eternal, that goes on lifetime after lifetime. This is what we sing every day at Guru Puja. Janame Janame say Guru. He's my spiritual master from lifetime after lifetime. So we might take birth in different families, in different countries, in different bodies, but that eternal relationship with the spiritual master continues lifetime after lifetime. And whatever percentage of spiritual life we're able to perfect in one lifetime, in our next lifetime, we're given the opportunity to come again in contact in the association of devotees and pick up just at that place where we left off in our previous life and continue from there under the guidance of our eternal spiritual master. The spiritual master appears in many forms. It's not just one form. So therefore, this eternal relationship and the relationship that the disciples have with the spiritual master will continue and be re-sparked now, even in this lifetime in America. Srila Prabhupada, he explained that many of his disciples, they took birth there by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord so they could assist him in carrying out the orders of his spiritual master. That morning, as Prabhupada chanted prayers and led kirtan, Linda didn't take her eyes off him. And when he asked everyone to chant Hare Krishna with him on beads, she excitedly accepted a strand from one of the devotees and tried to chant like him. Then he began reading the Sanskrit verse to begin his lecture, and Linda was captivated by the sound. If she were to continue with her graduate program in Greek, she would study Sanskrit next. So she listened with keen interest, proud that perhaps no one else in the room could understand as well as she. So not everyone who joined the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and was attracted to Prabhupada was a hippie. Many of us came from these scholastic backgrounds. She was a graduate student in Greek. I was a student of Oriental philosophy who found Bhagavad-Gita, went looking for the devotees, found Srila Prabhupada. So we weren't all hippies. Many of the, for instance, we'll read about Jayananda. He hasn't yet been introduced. Jayananda was an engineer, and he supported the entire temple, not by his engineering work. He became a cab driver just so that he could make money in order to support the whole temple as the temple president. So yes, Prabhupada is preaching to the hippies, but it wasn't that the entire society was consisting of only hippies who had given up all material life. Later that same morning, she met Srila Prabhupada upstairs in his apartment. Linda, in the first conversation I had with him, Swamiji summed up Greek civilization for me in a couple of sentences. He explained that Srimad Bhagavatam was the source of stories like the Iliad and the Odyssey, and was the source of Platonic philosophy. So Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada was explaining, was the source of actually the whole Greek philosophy. And that's later explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, how when Parshuram was killing the Kshatriyas, who were no longer properly following the Vedic system, those that he did not kill, they fled India into Europe and other Western countries, that whole area, and they set up their feudal systems or their Kshatriya systems in these barbaric countries that were non-Vedic. And the Greek, the Romans, they worshipped the demigods, Prabhupada explained. It was all demigod worship. So all of these stories coming from Greek and Roman philosophy and history originated in the Vedas, as did the philosophy of Plato and Socrates. It's all coming from the Vedas originally, but then when they were driven out of India, it became mixed and it became diluted into demigod worship. I was thrilled. Of course, I believed him. I knew that whatever he was speaking was the truth. There was no doubt in my mind, and he didn't discourage my love for Socrates. Prabhupada had called Socrates a devotee in disguise because he was seeking for truth. And if you read the book Beyond Illusion and Doubt, that's the now modern, the BBT has now printed this dialectic spiritualism that Prabhupada originally wrote into the book now called Beyond Illusion and Doubt. So you can read about Socrates there and what Prabhupada has to say about his philosophy. He told me that Socrates was actually a devotee in disguise. Then he began telling me the story of Krishna the butter thief. And I said, "Oh yes, I know that story. I saw a dance about Krishna as the butter thief." He was very pleased, and he laughed. He said, "Oh yes, you know? This encounter with Swamiji was like meeting an old friend, because I felt completely at home and protected. And I felt I had found what I was looking for. Here I could use my intelligence and ask the questions I had always wanted to ask in school. Here was someone who could actually give her the answers that she was seeking." Prabhupada initiated Linda, giving her the name Lilavati. Seeing her eagerness to serve him personally, he decided to teach her to cook by having her prepare his lunch. He already had a little weekend cooking class in which he taught Janaki, that's Mukunda's wife, Govindadasi, that's Gorsundar's wife, Nandarani, that was Dayananda's wife, and others the art of cooking for Krishna. Now he invited Lilavati to come. He would walk back and forth in the small room, showing the girls how to knead dough, cook chapatis, measure spices with his right palm, and cut vegetables and cook them in ghee with masala. The foods were basic: rice, chapatis, cauliflower with potatoes, but he wanted to teach the girls precisely how to cook. So you can see a difference here between the Society of Devotees in New York at 26 Second Avenue and now in San Francisco. 26 Second Avenue, Prabhupada, he also taught some of the girls how to cook, but the boys were doing the cooking. Kirtanananda, Chutananda, they were the steady cooks who were cooking for 20 to 30 devotees every day, rice, dal, chapati, and sabji. Now Prabhupada was having cooking classes because after Mukunda and Janaki married, then the marriages started there in San Francisco. Prabhupada performed several marriages. There were many women who had joined the temple there, and he was giving them cooking classes because cooking, cleaning, sewing, deity worship, these were the light services that Prabhupada assigned to the women in the temples. He didn't want them doing heavy service. So he was teaching them now this art of cooking. Now, it's described here, measuring spices in the right palm. So what we learned from Srila Prabhupada was you have your pot, and the volume of things that are in the pot, you look at that, and you put your salt or your spices in your right hand, and we would never use measuring cups or anything like that. You would just proportionately decide, I would need this much spice for this much volume in the pot, and throw it in like that. No measuring cups. When Jamuna had to write her cookbook, then she had to put all types of measurements because it was for a Western audience. But here in India, we didn't use measuring cups and measuring spoons. We did it by sight. You've got this much, you need this much, and you would mix it together like that, and always come out very nicely. So that's how Prabhupada taught the girls. Mukunda. One day, just out of curiosity, I went in to witness Swamiji's cooking classes. So I came in and stood at the doorway to Swamiji's kitchen. The women were there learning how to cook. And Swamiji said to me, "What are you doing?" "Oh," I said, "I just came to see my wife." Then Swamiji said, "Are you going back to Godhead or back to wife?" Everyone was amused, and I realized I wasn't welcome, so I left. So later in Mukunda's life, of course, Mukunda and Janaki, they were the first of the initiates. Janaki was the first female initiated disciple of Prabhupada. They did so much service for Prabhupada, not only in New York, now here in San Francisco, and then Prabhupada sent them to London to open up the London temple, which eventually opened up all of Europe. So amazing devotees. Then eventually they went back to America, And Janaki became a little disheartened because of the way women were treated in the society. So Mukunda and she became a little distant from the society. And Mukunda came to visit Prabhupada in Los Angeles, I believe. This is in his book, Miracle on 2nd Avenue. So eventually Mukunda was able to break his ties and affection for his wife. And he came to stay with Srila Prabhupada. And in that way, eventually he took sannyas. Now Janaki is still living in the place where she had originally come from, which was Portland, Oregon. She's still there. Although Jamuna has left and gone back to Godhead, that's her sister. Janaki is still alive, but she's not actively in the association of devotees anymore. Although we'll always remember the wonderful service that she did for Srila Prabhupada. The incident made me reflect on Swamiji's seriousness. For one thing, I learned that I should not be so attached to my wife. And secondly, I learned that his relationship with the women and what he was teaching them was actually very sacred. Not like the sometimes frivolous association between husband and wife. Because he spent many hours in the kitchen teaching them, they were very inspired. So cooking, just as with any of the 64 arts, you have to learn from a master. And in the 64 arts, there are many, many different types of cooking that are described, not just one art of cooking. Making of breads, making of salads, making of drinks with reddish tint in it, all different types. If you read the 64 arts, you'll see many of them are related to cooking, culinary arts. So Prabhupada was our original teacher. And then Prabhupada would also have us learn from others who were very expert. Or we would learn from those he had taught. That was the importance of these cookbooks that were made by the devotees. Soon after this time, they made the first Hare Krishna cookbook. These devotees who Prabhupada was teaching now, Malati, Jamuna, and others, they made the Hare Krishna cookbook, and that became the kitchen Bible for the temples around ISKCON at that time. Now, there's so many cookbooks, but originally Prabhupada taught these first devotees, those like a chain reaction, taught more devotees, and now we have such a high standard of Vedic cooking in our temples. This is Lilavati right in the center. Lilavati eventually married a devotee, and she had little twin girls who Prabhupada named Yogamaya and Mahamaya. So one of them, it looks like only one of them is in her lap there. There might be another one tucked there, but it's not a very clear picture. Lilavati tended to be proud. That's because that's just the whole problem. When you have wealth, education, any of those opulences, you become proud of them. Many of the devotees were not college graduates, and none of them were classical scholars. She sometimes typed for Swamiji, did his wash, or brought flowers to his room in the morning, and he had quickly chosen her to be his exclusive cook. After only a few days of cooking lessons, Swamiji had told her, "All right, you cook." And now he came in only occasionally to check on her. Once when he saw her rolling chapatis, he said, "Oh, you have learned very nicely." So this was how Prabhupada would treat his cooks. Once we learned how to cook, whether we learned directly from Prabhupada or those Prabhupada taught or those that Prabhupada had us learn from, he had me learn from his sister, he had me learn from his friend Bhagavad-Gita, all different types of cooking. He wouldn't come in and oversee the cooking. Once in a while, he would pass through the kitchen, see how we were doing. One time a devotee here was making chapatis, and he came in because in Prabhupada's house in those days, his washroom was right where the kitchen was. He would have to walk through the kitchen to get into the washroom because his house wasn't fully constructed yet. So he comes into the kitchen and he sees her. And he tells her, he said she was cooking the chapatis. And when Prabhupada taught us how to make chapatis, he said that you have to wait until there are pimples when it's on the tawa. There have to be pimples. When the pimples come, then you turn it over, the more pimples, and then you have to hang it over the fire and make sure it's very well cooked. And it had to be properly cooked for Prabhupada. And he taught us to make chapatis so that we could get a fresh chapati, run into to Prabhupada, one a minute. One after the other after the other. That's how he taught us. So he looked at her, how she was making the chapatis, and he admonished her. He said, I've told you so many times that chapati is raw, and you'll never learn. So he would teach us. At the same time, he didn't spare in correcting us if we were doing something wrong. And if you really did something wrong, he would punish us. He said, don't cook for a few days, have someone else cook. And then we would be very sorry that we made a mistake, then he would allow us to come back again. One time here, Prabhupada called me in one day. He said his teeth were hurting him. And he said I had to make sure that everything was very soft that day so that he didn't have to chew so much. So I made everything as usual, and Bhagaji had his way of making chapatis, slightly different from how Prabhupada taught us. Bhagaji being a Brijbasi, Bhagaji was Prabhupada's dear friend who built our Gurukula that used to be here. He had to have a chula to cook his chapatis on. He could not imagine cooking chapatis on a gas stove. It was irreligious. It had to be cooked on chula. So I was running to get the chula. While I go out of the kitchen to get the chula, someone sees that Prabhupada had a cooker. We all heard about Prabhupada's cooker. The cooker was very scientific. You had to fill it up, put it on the stove for exactly 45 minutes, take it off, and spice everything and have everything ready within 15 minutes. Prabhupada was so meticulous about saving time. So as I run to get the chula, someone comes into the kitchen, sees that the cooker is bubbling, and turns it off. And I had no idea the person came in the kitchen. So when it's exactly time to give Prabhupada his lunch, everything was raw and hard. And when I bring it in, Prabhupada was so upset that it wasn't soft, he punished me. He wouldn't let me cook for 3 days. The servant even went in and explained to Prabhupada that Prabhupada wasn't her. It didn't matter. You had to do everything right, otherwise you got punished. So here, Lilavati, being a very intelligent young woman, she had learned nicely, and Prabhupada was encouraging her. Preparing Swamiji's meals just right, with the proper spicing, without burning anything, and on time, was a challenge. By the time Lilavati finished, she would be perspiring and even crying from tension. But when she brought in his lunch, he would ask her to bring an empty plate, and he would serve her portions from his own plate and invite her to eat with him. We had a servant of Srila Prabhupada here, Harikesh. Prabhupada would have him also come in, and he would have Harikesh feed him with his hand. And he would say, now feed me with your left hand. And she said, Prabhupada, I can't feed you with my left. He said, no, for a devotee, left hand, right hand, both are okay. So Prabhupada was teaching, he was just eliciting the love of his devotees by personally interacting with his devotees in that way. For the first few days, Lilavati made remarks about the wonderful taste of the prasadam, and Swamiji would smile or raise his eyebrows. But then she noticed that he never spoke while eating, but seemed to be concentrating intensely as he sat cross-legged, bending his body over the plate of prasadam and eating with his right hand. So I remember one time I brought in Prabhupada's plate. Prabhupada would chant his Gayatri before he took his lunch prasadam. So he was chanting his Gayatri and brought in the plate, put it down, and he didn't speak to me. He just pointed to the fan because no one had turned the fan on. So I understood, of course, he wanted the fan turned on. So Prabhupada, he would always be in complete silence unless he wanted something or he needed to tell you something, then he would call you in while he was eating. Otherwise, always alone and in silence, Prabhupada would take prasadam. And the sannyasis also learned that from him, that a sannyasi is supposed to take prasadam alone. And as Prabhupada made more and more sannyasis, they wouldn't sit with the crowd of devotees, they would take separately. One day on Ekadasi, Lilavati arrived late at Swamiji's apartment, thinking there would not be much cooking on a fast day. But when she entered the kitchen, she found Swamiji himself busily cooking. He was heating something white in a skillet, vigorously stirring and scraping it from the bottom of the pan. We didn't have karais in America. Karais were Asian. The Chinese used to cook in karais. There were very few Indians in America. So we would have skillets, which were flat saucepans. So Prabhupada was using that to make a sweet. Oh, he said, I was just wondering, where is that girl? Lilavati was too shy to ask what Swamiji was doing, so she simply busied herself cutting vegetables. Today is a fast day, she said, as if chiding Swamiji for cooking. You have to understand, he replied. In Krishna consciousness, a fast day means a feast day. We are offering this to Krishna. Lilavati continued to keep her distance from Swamiji's whitish, sticky-looking preparation until he completed it and placed it on the windowsill to cool. Later it will harden, he said, and we can cut it and serve it. And with that he turned and walked out of the kitchen. When Lilavati finished cooking and served Swamiji his Ekadasi lunch, he asked her to bring him some of that thing on the windowsill. He didn't give it a name yet. He took a bite, seemed pleased, and asked Lilavati to call Mukunda and Janaki to taste it. So Prabhupada was teaching a new recipe to the devotees on that day, a special Ekadasi sweet. Janaki took a bite and exclaimed, "It's wonderful, simply wonderful." So which sweet was Prabhupada teaching them? Simply Wonderfuls. That's how I got the name. Incredible, what is this? Turning to Lilavati, Swamiji asked, what is in this preparation? I don't know, Swamiji, she said. You don't know? He replied. You were standing right by me in the kitchen, and you don't remember? Lilavati's face turned red. Oh, Swamiji, Lilavati replied, I was very busy. I just didn't see. Oh, you are busy without intelligence, he replied. And he laughed for a long time, until Mukunda was also laughing. Lilavati felt even more humiliated. So Prabhupada tells a story. There's lazy intelligent, there's busy intelligent, there's lazy foolish, and there's busy foolish. So topmost is lazy intelligence. And then after that is busy intelligent. And the worst, the most dangerous, is busy foolish. So the lazy intelligent, Prabhupada gives the story of the king wanted to weigh an elephant. So all his ministers were running around trying to find a scale big enough to put an elephant on. Nobody could find it. That was the busy intelligence. And then one intelligent minister, it was probably an Akbar and Birbal, he got a scale, and put the elephant in a boat, and as far down as the boat sank, he then took the elephant off and put that many rocks into the boat until the boat sank down to that same level. And then he weighed the rocks separately. So that is called lazy intelligent. He didn't go running around everywhere futilely to find a big enough scale for an elephant. He used his lazy intelligence. And then busy fool, that's the monkeys. They're always busy doing something. They're doing mischief. Busy foolish. Okay, so Prabhupada is teaching Lilavati a lesson here. Swamiji asked Janaki if she could tell what was in the preparation. She couldn't, except that it was sweet. He then sent Lilavati downstairs to get Govindadasi and Gaur Sundar. When they entered, Swamiji told Lilavati, "Go get some more of that simply wonderful thing." Again, this time in front of 4 devotees, Swamiji asked Lilavati, "So what is in this preparation?" And again she defended herself. She had been too busy to notice. And again he laughed until everyone was laughing with him. He then asked Govindadasi to taste the simply wonderful and say what was in it. Immediately she guessed: sugar, butter, and powdered milk. Oh, Swamiji looked at Lilavati. She is an artist. She is intelligent. To Lilavati, the whole episode was a devastating ordeal. Only later did she understand that Swamiji had been trying to teach her humility. She considered herself a little bit superior, being a Greek scholar. But Prabhupada was showing her that here's an artist, a simple artist, who's more intelligent than she is. It was 7 a.m. Srila Prabhupada sat on his dais in the temple. Beside him, on an altar, stood the recently acquired statue of Krishna. Now we're introducing Krishna. The child Krishna stood 2 feet high, with his left hand on his hip, his right hand holding a rod. Gurudas had found him at an import store and had begged the manager to sell him. And after several visits, the man had agreed for $35. Prabhupada had given him the name Kartamashi, the boss. This morning, as Prabhupada and Kartamashi looked out at the devotees in the room, only about 6 people were present. The night before, the temple had been crowded. This is 7 o'clock in the morning. Devotees are supposed to be up and attending Prabhupada's classes. "Where are the others?" Prabhupada asked. And then he gave the answer himself. "They're sleeping. All this sleeping is not good." He took out his kartals and began playing the 1-2-3 rhythm. Now Prabhupada noticed this about the devotees. He was in a plane one time, and the devotees, because they get up very early and they're serving all day and then they go to sleep late at night, everyone in the plane was wide awake, looking at the movies, reading their books, whatever. But the devotees were they were all sleeping. And Prabhupada looks at why everyone else is up. Why my devotees are sleeping like this? So devotees, Prabhupada, he would sleep 2 hours at night, then he would stay up and translate all night. But the devotees, sometimes Prabhupada even came in the room with his sannyasis. Guru Kripa tells this story, and he would kick them. Kick them. Why are you wasting your life sleeping like this? So artificially we can't give up sleep, but as devotees at least we have to attend the morning program when Prabhupada is giving a class. He took out his kartals and began playing the 1-2-3 rhythm. Mukunda took up a mridanga and played along, trying to execute the rhythms Srila Prabhupada had recently taught him. Srila Prabhupada had not even begun singing when the door opened and 6 barefoot hippies wandered in, reeking of marijuana. They glanced around, then sat down on the floor with the devotees as Prabhupada began singing Guruvastakam, the Vaishnav prayers to the spiritual master. So this Guruvastakam was always the first prayer that we all learned, because every morning we would sing this Guruvastakam. This is before Prabhupada initiated Mangalartik. Although none of his disciples knew the words, they loved to listen to Swamiji sing these morning prayers. Unhurriedly, he sang each verse, several times repeating each line, deliberately developing the mood of unadulterated service to the spiritual master. Then one of the hippies, a boy with long, straight blonde hair and a red headband, began mumbling, fidgeting, and moaning. Someone softly asked him to be quiet. The boy paused, but then moaned again. Swamiji and his followers were used to drugged hippies who stayed up all night and came to the morning program, sometimes disrupting things. But Prabhupada would just go on with his singing. Usually, the visitors remained submissive, and even if they occasionally called out in a strange mood, they usually found peace in chanting Hare Krishna and would try to blend with the energy of the devotees. But today's discordant visitor seemed agitated by the chanting, as if it were challenging him. Rather, he sounded like he was challenging it. The devotees began clapping in time with Prabhupada's kartals, and when Prabhupada began singing Hare Krishna, his 6 followers immediately joined him, chanting both lead and chorus. Prabhupada looked at them gravely, encouraging the bedraggled early morning band of youngsters, and they responded determinedly. The guests sat in drugged contemplation, although 1 or 2 tried singing along. But the blond boy with the red headband remained adamantly disharmonious, moaning defiantly, as if trying to throw off the effects of the chanting. Nonetheless, despite the boy's moaning, which was sometimes loud and savage, Prabhupada kept singing, and the devotees kept chanting. Mukunda and Hayagriva exchanged anxious glances, but tolerated the boy, unsure what else to do. Some of the devotees were disturbed and even frightened, but they had all also heard Swamiji say in recent lectures that advanced devotees aren't shaken in any circumstances. Swamiji was their leader, not only in devotional prayers, but also in how to respond to this intruder. So they waited and watched him for a sign. Now this also happened here at our temple. Now we have so many chokidars who guard the gates, and during class, they make sure that there are no disturbances. But when the temple first opened, we didn't have any grills. We had monkeys that would come into the temple. We had pigeons who would fly everywhere, especially the chandeliers, and sometimes devotees would have sticks to try to get the pigeons from not disturbing the classes. And we had guests, and there was no traffic control whatsoever. The guests would come in with their babies and yelling and singing and Jai Jai Shri Banki Bihari. It didn't matter that the class was going on to them. And Prabhupada would just go on with his class. And then we had one temple commander who decided to take matters into his own hands and control the people. And Prabhupada got very upset. He said, like, what are you doing? They've come here for darshan. Let them. So it was very hard to understand how tolerant Srila Prabhupada actually was. He would allow people to come into the temple, come for darshan, but then after Srila Prabhupada disappeared, the mood changed. Now they lock the temple doors, they don't let anyone come in. But Prabhupada himself was extremely tolerant when guests came into the temple. Prabhupada remained undisturbed, but although after 20 minutes the kirtan was strong and determined, the blond boy's madness was not going away. As the chanting built up momentum, he became more agitated. He screamed like a lost soul and hollered like a rock singer. He was becoming more and more troubled and angry. When the devotees rose to their feet and began dancing, the boy began dancing too, but in his own way, crying and pounding his chest. Mukunda played louder on the drum. The sounds were discordant, a clash of individual madness and a group chanting, until Prabhupada finally brought the kirtan to a close. The devotees bowed their heads to the floor, and Srila Prabhupada intoned the Sanskrit prayers honoring the spiritual masters, the Supreme Lord, and the sacred places. All glories to the assembled devotees, he said. They responded, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhupada said. And then, as was his morning custom, he announced, chant one round. Everyone sat down, including the crazy hippie. The devotees put aside the drums and kartals, reached for their large red beads, and began chanting japa in unison. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Fingering one bead at a time, they uttered the mantra, then proceeded to the next bead. Surprised at this turn of events, the blond boy commented loudly, "Far out!" As rapid chanting filled the room, the boy jumped to his feet and shouted, "Come with me!" He whirled about, faced Srila Prabhupada, and howled, "I am God." Then he began screaming long, loud, berserk cries. Wahoo! Wahoo! Now we've heard this mantra before. That crazy girl who came in the middle of the night and knocked on Prabhupada's door. When he opened up the door, she said exactly the same thing. Ah! Oh! He sobbed, growled, grumbled, stomped his feet. Like a small child, he explored every sound his voice could make. Beating his fists on his chest again and again, sounds like Dvita. He cried, "I am God." And one of the boy's friends suddenly played a few notes on a panpipe. But Srila Prabhupada kept chanting japa, and the devotees also tried to continue chanting undaunted, while at the same time keeping an eye on the madman and wondering where it would all end. Then, with a final, violent ejaculation, the boy shrieked, "I am God!" and in anger and disgust, strode out of the room, slamming the door behind him, yelling as he ran down the street. The proper japa peacefully engulfed the storefront, and Srila Prabhupada's voice assumed its place more clearly above the voices of all the chanting devotees. So this is how Srila Prabhupada handled disturbances. He wasn't disturbed. He just went on with chanting Hare Krishna. After about 10 minutes of chanting, Prabhupada recited, Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Let there be all glory to the congregational chanting of Hare Krishna, which cleanses the dirt from the mirror of the mind and gives a taste of the nectar for which we are always hankering. As Prabhupada put on his spectacles and opened the Bhagavad-Gita, he had been speaking each morning on the 6th chapter, the room settled and became silent for hearing his lecture. His students, some of whom had been imbibing his instructions for more than 2 months, listened attentively as he spoke the eternal Parampara message. It was Krishna's timeless message, yet Swamiji was presenting it just for them as they sat on the rug early in the morning in the small storefront, 518 Frederick Street in Haight-Ashbury. Prabhupada lectured on the transmigration of the soul. Foolish people, he said, aspire for material acquisitions. They don't know that these things are finished with the death of the body. So Srila Prabhupada, despite any disturbances wherever he was, his same eternal message was being distributed to whoever would hear his lectures. Now he was in San Francisco, in the heart of the hippie kingdom, and despite the madness of some of the drug-induced hippies, he still continued undisturbed with his message. We got a message 2 days ago from one devotee who lives in Trinidad. This is the time when all the temples around the world are having their Rath Yatras. So he wrote that in Trinidad, their Rath Yatra goes down Frederick Street. There's a Frederick Street in Trinidad, and they have their Rath Yatra coming down Frederick Street. So all over the world, same message, same activities. This is the universal application of Krishna consciousness for human society. Spiritual life, however, is of the utmost importance because it is never lost. So even if Krishna consciousness becomes inconvenient or uncomfortable, one should never give it up. Srila Prabhupada was again stressing that the devotee is never disturbed, a point that seemed especially relevant in the wake of this morning's interruption. A devotee, Prabhupada explained, is always tolerant. We had another example here. When the temple first opened, sometimes we would have sahajiyas come into the temple, and they would roll on the floor and cry and all of the false expressions of ecstasy. And one of our devotees objected to these sahajiya expressions, and he kicked a devotee who was rolling on the ground and dragged him out of the temple. And that person who was rolling on the ground and was dragged out of the temple naturally became very offended. And he went and told Srila Prabhupada what the devotee, the brahmachari, had done to him. And Prabhupada called that brahmachari. He was very upset with the brahmachari. And he made the brahmachari leave Vrindavan. Yes. So we have to be very careful to maintain tolerance and not be disturbed, because you see, by the Sarvatma Snapanam, Sri Krishna Sankirtanam, if we remain fixed in our chanting of Hare Krishna, they fly out the door of their own account. Prabhupada didn't have to do anything except continue chanting Hare Krishna. Prabhupada told a story about a great devotee, Haridasa Thakur, a contemporary of Lord Chaitanya's, who endured severe beating at the hands of a Muslim magistrate. As Prabhupada told the story, he improvised dialogue. "Oh," the magistrate said to Haridasa, "you are born in such a nice family, and you are chanting Hare Krishna?" And then Prabhupada spoke for Haridasa. "Sir, many Hindus also have become Mohammedan. So if some Mohammedan become Hindu, what is the harm?" Prabhupada didn't change the pitch or accent of his voice while taking different parts of the dialogue. But with the subtle storyteller's art, each voice became a distinct person. The magistrate spoke threateningly. "Oh, you are arguing?" Then Prabhupada became the narrator. "So it was decided that Haridasa was to be punished. Give the dog a bad name and hang it." Then Prabhupada became Haridasa's floggers, who despite repeatedly beating Haridasa, were unable to make him cry out in pain. Finally, exhausted, they spoke up. "Sir, the idea was that you would die, but now we see that you do not die. So now punishment is awaiting us." See how Prabhupada is explaining this story. They took him and beat him in 21 marketplaces. He didn't cry out in pain, and the intention was that they kill him by beating, but he wasn't dying. So then the floggers were going to get punished because he didn't die. "Haridasa, what do you want?" The floggers, "We want that you should die." Narrator, then he played himself into samadhi, and the floggers brought him to the magistrate. The magistrate, "Throw him in the water. Don't put him in the graveyard. He has become Hindu." Srila Prabhupada concluded his tale. The others were flogging him, and he was chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. He was undisturbed. He was steady. Therefore, Lord Krishna says that a person who is spiritually advanced, for him there is no misery, even in this world, and what to speak of the other world. So Haridasa Thakur, we know, was such an advanced devotee that after these incidents of his preaching, he came and was doing his bhajan on the shores of the ocean, the bay, at Jagannath Puri. Lord Chaitanya, because Haridasa Thakur, he would not dare to enter the temple of Lord Jagannath because he felt that he was low-born and he didn't want to contaminate the Brahmins who were coming to do the service there. So the Supreme Lord himself would come to see Haridasa Thakur every day and bring prasadam for him, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, whoever was staying with him at the time. Because these devotees who had been in the Mohammedan service, they never entered the temple of Lord Jagannath out of fear of contaminating the devotees who were taking darshan there. So Lord Chaitanya himself would go to see them. And then in the end, Haridasa Thakur, he was carried by Lord Chaitanya, bathed by Lord Chaitanya, and then placed in samadhi by Lord Chaitanya. A devotee suffers no loss, Prabhupada explained, even if he doesn't become perfectly Krishna conscious, or even if he falls away. His next birth also will be human. Now Prabhupada is going to start a new story, but it's 7 o'clock, and this is a long story about Savitri and Satyavan, a story from the Mahabharata. So we'll save this story for next week, because Prabhupada gives a lot of lessons from this story from the Mahabharata. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai.